fancy pants. Fancy pants.
Oh, fancy pants.
Fancy pants.
Fancy pants.
Fancy pants.
Fancy pants.
Fancy pants.
Ah, fancy pants.
Such fancy pants.
Gotta put on your fancy pants tonight. Going down to the city where the lights are bright with my disco balls and my LED light. Gotta put on my fancy pants tonight.
Right, this is your man, the STL Stranger, Umar Lee, down here on lovely Cherokee Street with the brothers Vines. And I just want to say, before I get started, hello, Randy.
Hey, Umar. Good to see you again.
Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Umar.
I'm very impressed by the book selection. You have over here The Old Neighborhood, Ray Suarez, which is my favorite NPR personality ever. You have Zion in the Valley, the great book of St. Louis Jewish history. You have Mr. Mayor, Cervantes. You got some good stuff in here.
Yeah, we collect obscure books about St. Louis history and urban history in general, too. A lot of New York and some of our other favorite cities. Cleveland, Baltimore, lots of Detroit.
Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah,
Not so
I don't
much.
think there's any Tucson.
Not so much. So, for people listening to this podcast, St. Louis Speaks episode, I want to let you know that if you go to when this is published, at the St. Louis Speaks website, we're going to have two really great things. We're going to have the YouTube video that I did with Randy a couple years ago, where we talked about the business, we talked about his upbringing, family background, and then we're going to have the video I did with both Vines brothers at the Carpenter branch of the St. Louis Public Library. It's well over an hour, where we discussed the family history of the Vines family going back to Europe, and it was a really fascinating, very fascinating interview.
It's a good talk.
And so this is going to be a really great podcast episode. We were actually down here on Cherokee Street a few days ago, where we interviewed people on the street and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that'd be interesting to hear.
But right now, today, as I look at the Kings Highway sign on the wall and the collector of revenue of the city of St. Louis on the wall, November 3rd, 1964, less than 1 year after the death of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. We got a lot of political issues going on in the city right now. Mm-hmm. We got the Board of Aldermen, which is two big things that came up. The revoting the shrinkage of the Board of Aldermen, of the ward reduction from 28 to 14, and the residency requirement repeal. And interesting issues. And what are your basic thoughts on that? Let's start with ward reduction. What are your basic thoughts on ward reduction?
My basic thoughts are, I think ward reduction is a good idea. Mm-hmm. And you know, I realize that sensitivities are high, and it's definitely there are implications anytime, you know, sweeping changes are made like that, especially in a city that is kind of mired in racial tension and just some unrest when it comes to politics and representation. And I absolutely appreciate it. And I guess my position is more influenced by the fact that I think that the evidence is clear that whatever St. Louis has been doing, you know, in terms of leadership, government, representation, whatever it is, for the past 60, 70 years, it just hasn't been working. And, you know, I realize there are lots of external factors in the decline of cities in St. Louis. But, you know, there is a resistance to change, stodginess in St. Louis that I think is... sometimes it's endearing, and then a lot of times it's to its own detriment. And sometimes I think St. Louisans can be their own worst enemy with their aversion to change. And when we have an outsized government that no longer is appropriately scaled to the existing population dynamics, I think that presents on all kinds of problems, functionality, you know, efficiency. And a whole myriad of other issues, and it's really, to me, and understanding that you can't really get into topics like this without touching on race. But from my personal position, it has nothing to do with race. It's just about common sense, about when you no longer have almost 900,000 people in the city limits that you did when 28 wards were necessary, and now you have a tiny fraction of that many people. It doesn't make sense to have the same size government serving a much smaller population. I just don't see how it's sustainable. And it seems to me like some of the arguments I've heard in favor of reversing the vote from 2012 seem to be kind of hinging on, fairness in terms of race and all that. And I think that it's a little, it's just a little late for that. I feel like we do well when we're forced to confront something, an issue. And I don't think the conversations have been had on how can we approach this resizing of our Board of Aldermen in a really logical, equitable way. I don't think that conversation has been had. That's a problem that it hasn't been had, but I think it still can be had. I think there's still time to do that and to make every effort to make this the best possible outcome for all sides of this issue.
Well, there were two arguments that would be made, or many arguments that would be made with a counterpoint. One of them being, the first being that 28 and 2012 were very unique because of the presidential candidacy of Barack Obama, and that you had this huge voter turnout, which we'll probably never see again because of the enthusiasm for the Obama candidacy, and that very few people were going to the polls thinking about that that proposition to shrink the board to 14, and that to have an election where that proposition is the dominant issue of the election cycle, it will give people more of a chance to really think about and study that issue. That's number one. The second big argument, and the Black Caucus presented this, and in all fairness, I agree with this argument, is that at the end of the day, you're going to have to come to people in 21st Ward, and 1st Ward, 2nd Ward, in these wards which are already underserved by the city, which are already not just in decline, but in some of these neighborhoods, some conditions in terms of education and life expectancy and many other things that are bordering on in the city need the most representation. That's a big.
I appreciate that. I guess my counter to that, what has happened to those underserved wards over the years with 28 aldermen. Look at what, no city really, at least on paper, by most metrics, has declined as precipitously and dramatically as St. Louis since 1950. No city has, not even Detroit, in terms of population. And I really just like that. I feel like that argument holds merit in theory, but there's no way to tell whether 14 aldermen could do a better. They might be able to do a better job than 28 aldermen. There may be more initiatives that can get done without the bureaucracy and the multiple layers and the infighting and the courtesy and all the the ugly things that we know come with St. Louis politics. It's just not tested yet. The thing is, to me, I feel like you get the best voter sentiment when you have a high turnout like you did in 2012, especially with a president that was very popular with minority communities turning out in force. And I feel like I like to think that the voters of St. Louis are informed enough to know, and if they weren't informed, they could leave it blank. And it all comes down to, like, is the government working for us or is it not? And to say, like, to uphold what I consider to be the status quo, which would be keeping 28 wards intact, I think is really not moving forward. It's just destined to keep the city in this cycle of stagnancy at best and probably decline at worst, because it just has not been working for us. However, if we were to implement the change that voters approved in 2012, I think that forces us, we have no choice but to sit down, figure this out, make some uncomfortable decisions, and move forward in some way and see how that works out, and maybe that's naive to think, but there's a lot of votes I would love to undo, I would love to undo the 2018 presidential election, and to me it seems like a very decisive vote, and we just have to allow the city to move forward without kind of micromanaging and assuming that the voters are more uninformed than maybe they were.
Is it, how do you look at the stark racial division that the Black Caucus in its entirety stood against this?
Well,
I mean, it's a, there's obviously a difference in vantage point on this issue, because whether you were, and this has kind of opened up a fault line between the quote-unquote progressive caucus and the Black caucus over this issue, which may play into the president of the Board of Aldermen race coming up next year. Mm-hmm. How do you mend that rift to keep it from growing?
I think it's something that absolutely needs to be considered, and certainly you don't want to dismiss the collective position of any one group, and I don't like the idea of people imposing their agenda on communities that are disenfranchised. I really don't, and I'm not going to try to do that here, but there are, nothing's cut and dry, and we all know, in the Board of Aldermen, there are deals cut all the time, and tying in with the police residency and all that, it gets really murky in there, and some of the non-African-American aldermen who signed on with the Black Caucus on that vote, that's also kind of
Joe Vaccaro.
Yeah,
and,
you can tell there's
others.
some protectionism involved with that. And, at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to this. We got a city with 310,000 people that was built to accommodate many, many more, almost 1 million. Mm-hmm. It had a government at one time that was appropriately sized for its population. That has not been the case forever. Every other city, I can't think of a single other city that has declined so dramatically that hasn't adjusted the size of its government to be more consistent with its population. And I don't see how it could be effective. And if it were effective to keep 28 aldermen, I think our city would be in better shape than it is right now. And I think the minority community would be better served than it is now.
It seems like a glaring example of the provincialism that prevents St. Louis from really reaching its potential and growing. While we watch, we used to be running with New York and Chicago and Philadelphia, and now Wichita and Colorado Springs are passing us by. It's like, oh my God, how did we get here?
Even suburbs of Dallas.
Yeah, that's crazy. There you go. Yeah, I think Addison, I don't know, Arlington,
Irving, Arlington.
It's kind of sad, and we all, any reasonable person can zoom out and the macro view see that all these different jurisdictions and governmental bodies is not helping us grow efficiently and compete on a national level. So I think this is, the ward thing is just an example within an example.
Well, and also, there's just a lot of irony I see in this whole issue, and it's really complex, and there's a lot of layers to it. But, take Ferguson, for example, and the aftermath of that, how it really brought to the surface all the fragmentation and the divisions, and the reason some of these tiny little suburbs in St. Louis County ever incorporated in the first place. There are these little tiny factions, these fiefdoms that people wanted to protect their turf, and we realized the problems, the systemic problems that those present, and we are trying to eradicate those divisions and that inequity and that protectionism that keeps St. Louis so fragmented and balkanized. And here we are, there seems to be a recognition of the fact that we need to do something to right-size our government. But at the same time, now there's a pushback and like we want to keep divisions, we want to keep political boundaries in place, you know. And I just think that unless we start unifying and working as one city, and you know, St. Louis and its region against other major American cities, I think we're just going to be infighting with ourselves, just as we have since you know, the mid 20th century, and it really just has not gotten us too far.
So let me ask Jeff this question. We're in 2018. Let's look at the 2040 census. We're down to what, 314,000?
Something like that.
Goes with the area code, 314.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the population number in 2040?
I really think it's going to depend a lot on how we get our shit together. Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
How we get our shit
you can
together.
be as profane if you want to.
I mean, let's face it. I'm pretty sure that St. Louis has a worse national reputation than Detroit right now. I really feel that way. I think that for whatever reason, a lot of other Rust Belt cities have kind of, you know, become symbols of cool in their own gritty, scrappy ways. And St. Louis has managed to escape being grouped in even with the crappy cities that are now cool. Like, we're kind of ignored, and when you hear St. Louis in the news, it's not usually a good thing that we're associated with. I feel like we have the potential to grow again and actually, you know, be a magnet for, you know, new jobs, new economy. But the perception of crime, racial tension, dysfunction, inefficiency is holding us back. I don't think it helps that we're in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Either.
Which is a state that you could argue this is a border state, but is really becoming more and more southern. You know, going to the SEC conference. I think it's just an example that, you know, it's become so conservative in Jefferson City, you know, evangelical fundamentalist in the legislature, passing just ridiculous laws that states like Oklahoma and Alabama do as well. I mean, we're about the same age. We really grew up in a swing state where Democrats controlled the legislature. The presidential race could have went either way. You had strong labor, had a very strong influence in Missouri politics. And we've seen a state that's went right to work, that has become more and more conservative.
Yeah.
And it's really the climate in Missouri is just really a reactionary climate. I agree with you. I don't think it helps St. Louis, whether you have 28 or 14 wards or 8 wards or 50, being in the state of Missouri. I don't think that is helpful.
Well,
No,
and it presents a really, you know, a very pronounced challenge to an urban city like St. Louis that already has, you know, inherent, you know, problems that reflect the greater urban condition around the country. And that's why, like, we hope that, like, we need to come together as a city. Like, you know, we probably have more in common than not, you know, as an urban population center.
Right. But we don't work with Kansas City at all.
That's another problem.
Well,
I think the drawback of being in Missouri is that it's kind of the chameleon state that draws from so many different regions that Kansas City may as well be in the West. St. Louis is like an old school eastern city. The Boot Heels, the South, and then, you know, Kirksville or whatever may as well be Iowa. There's a disconnect, and I think that characterizes the state. You know, that's the adjective I would use almost more than anything else. It's just like it's such a schizophrenic identity.
Look at Scott Fawn with his $50,000 in cash to who did he deliver it to?
Jay Barnes. I was getting Scott one. Al Watkins.
I delivered it to Al Watkins. So the Missouri Times, was his publication, and he's a rural guy, not a journalist, but he's a rural guy. You know, probably not the most ethical individual himself, but you know, it's all about Missouri. And I don't know if I'm the only St. Louis, and it feels I just don't really identify. I went to the Westminster College graduation over the weekend in Fulton. It was great. It was lovely. I liked the campus, liked the school. College graduations are a great thing, you know. But I just don't identify with the state.
I don't either.
I don't see what I have in common with people in the Ozarks and people in the Boot Hill and you know, and northern Missouri. I just think there's like a vast cultural difference.
Well, you know, and they're a case in point. Even in the industry we're in, like St. Louis Civic Pride T-shirts and stuff. You go to other cities like even Cleveland or Detroit, and their local Civic Pride T-shirt shops, they feature a lot of designs with the state of Ohio or the state of Michigan, like Michigan Pride or Ohio Home or whatever. And here, you almost never see anyone being proud to be from Missouri. I mean, you might see some Mizzou stuff every so often, but not
even a lot.
Yeah.
Like
No,
not even a
very
lot compared to
unusual.
if you're going to Oklahoma. You see OU and Oklahoma State everywhere. If you're in Texas, you see Texas Longhorn State stuff everywhere, and Aggies, and in other states like that. In Arizona, you see a lot of Arizona States, and et cetera, et cetera. Florida. You see a little Mizzou stuff. It's not that there's none, and they have their fans, but it's not to the level that you see in a lot of other states.
Not like Missouri
I think
Pride.
Kansas City is a lot more Missouri oriented. It seems,
But they got a lot of KU stuff up there too.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
Yeah.
But
As far as identifying with the state, you know, feeling part of the state, I think St. Louis is more distinct than ever.
it's always been kind of an outlier because it's older than the U.S. and let alone Missouri. So it's always had this culture of you know, self-sufficiency or, you know, insulation,
autonomy.
I guess.
But we have a governor, Eric Greitens,
Oh God.
went to your high school, Parkway North,
Yeah.
the Vikings. Grew up not far from you. He grew up in Maryland Heights and Creve Coeur, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're Creve Coeur,
Yeah, so you're not too far from him.
Right.
And, you know, so he kind of is representing your high school in Jeff City. And, you know, I thought he was a guy before this that he had legs, and a lot of people thought that. And he was on Fox News. He was being covered nationally. He was like weighing in on North Korea and Middle East peace. So that's clearly a guy that's trying to get on the national stage because that doesn't have shit to do with Missouri, right? And people were speaking of him as a presidential candidate and a VP and a cabinet guy, and he was very much using Missouri as a stepping stone to get to national office.
Using is the key word.
Yeah.
Pandering to state conservatives.
And not making a lot of friends in Jeff City, Republicans or Democrats, because they didn't think he needed them, because he was just using it. And it's a tale. It's like a morality tale. Like he has got done in by his ambition, by his lack of ethics, by his sexual desires, which has, you know, brought a lot of people down, high and low. How do you feel about Eric right now?
Yeah, he's the biggest embarrassment.
We
And,
didn't vote for him.
But yeah, I mean,
I was going to ask you that.
Never. No, my God. He's a classic opportunist, a malignant narcissist. You know, certain traits in common with our president. But I think the danger of Greitens is that he's probably a little smarter than the president, at least sharper in terms of how
Definitely
he comes
academically
across.
smarter.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to like underestimate his knowledge. You know, he's a Navy SEAL. He has an impressive, you know, resume when it comes to his service or whatever. But ever since then, he'll do whatever is clever. You know, whatever he's got to say or do to you know to advance his own career goals or whatever aspirations he has. If the state of Missouri were a blue state, electing, you know, and there was a lot of Democratic momentum here, I'm sure he would be the forefront Democrat running on that ticket. You know, he'll just do whatever it changes the color with the climate. And but he's a complete asshole. And I mean, really, I'm not afraid to say that.
I mean, does anyone really believe that he's a conservative, God-fearing man? I mean, come on.
I find the whole thing a little creepy. I got to be honest with you. The first I saw him speak with Mike Pence, and you know, this is a nonpartisan program, so I don't like to give my opinions too much, but I will from time to time. And I will say, by the way, my Twitter handle is @Governor Greitens, and people keep tweeting me like they're talking to the governor. And I had Sarah Kendzior and I went on a frozen custard crawl, and one of her like liberal opponents was like, "I knew she was a phony. She was out with Governor Greitens." You know,
so funny.
And,
Hilarious.
and the Post-Dispatch kept on tagging me in photos with Governor Greitens. But
That's great.
anyway, this is like a sensitive area, so I don't want people to take it the wrong way. But I think that the whole religion thing with him was a little creepy. When he got on stage with Mike Pence, and Mike Pence says, you know, if you bow your head like I do, and you bow your head like Eric Greitens does, and we're going to say a word prayer to the Lord, and in the name of Jesus. I mean, and Eric Greitens, it's you know, he's a Jewish guy, and he acted like he didn't want anybody to know he was Jewish too. Right. Did you get that impression too?
For sure,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Like that was a secret. You know what I'm trying to say?
Until it was convenient.
And then until it was convenient.
When the U City Cemetery, where our grandparents are buried,
Right.
actually was vandalized, he was there too. And so I think Pence came for that.
Pence came for that.
And,
well, Pence was in town,
Okay.
and that had happened kind of at the same
Right,
time. So
right.
it just yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's where when he rose to the occasion,
Right.
it was when it was advantageous to him to do so. But you know, most of the time he's bowing to, he's kowtowing
one of his
to
recent tweets had a Bible verse.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
cited a Bible verse. It's just so.
It's phony.
And now he's saying his faith is helping him get through this issue. I'm not saying he's not a religious guy, but you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think his whole thing is a little disingenuous. You know, I think it's kind of like playing. I mean, it's like the whole Elliot Spitzer. Was it Elliot Spitzer? Or was it Wiener that went to sex?
Lost track.
Went to sex therapy. Ride on a horse.
Yeah.
And you're gonna ride on a horse until you don't like to have sex anymore.
Oh my God.
Like I don't say, keep me away from that horse. I don't want to be on that fucking
Is
horse.
that really? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, it's like a sex therapy. You ride on a horse, and whatever's on that horse, keep me the fuck off that horse. but it's like the anti-Viagra and something like that.
Yeah.
But so now, like Greitens is doing this thing, like as a man of faith, I've reflected on my sin, and I just have a difficulty buying the
I think he
authenticity
comes
of that.
across as stiff. I mean, I don't think he's a good actor. I don't think he's really good at playing the part.
Well, and
Most people can see through it.
It's really phony from the start. I mean, he lived in the Central West End,
Right.
So it's really difficult to be, an overt conservative living in the Central West End. There's a reason he chose to live there as a
Married to a
anyplace
PhD.
else. Yeah, I mean, like he's just whatever works for him in the moment. That's where he's going to follow, and I really do hope that the end is near for his term, because I really think that it's distracting our state from moving forward in meaningful ways, and like we're already a state that has bad perception issues, and this just doesn't help.
I am amused by the tweet responses he gets, though. I love the the tweets
and the Facebook messages and stuff like that. You know, the thing is, 6 months ago, people were saying this is a guy with presidential ambition, and now, you know, in all likelihood, his political career is over. You know, he'll probably be impeached. But even if he doesn't really have a political future.
Right.
Yeah, he'll write a book and be fine.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think he do? You think he'll write? I think what he's going to do, he's going to go on Fox News.
I saw your
He'll
prediction.
have his own TV show called The Pull Up. I don't know if it's called The Pull Up. That's just my that's my suggestion. And a career at Fox News, punditry, something like that. I mean, he's a guy who likes the limelight. Well, he's not going to go away and be quiet. He's like a young guy. He's going to make his voice heard, but just won't be in elected office.
Right. Yeah, no, I thought your prediction was pretty spot on and amusing, but I could totally see it playing out like that. But who even knows?
And I think he'll be acquitted. I don't think the prosecutor's office is quite up to snuff.
Yeah, that's pretty embarrassing.
It's pretty embarrassing, yeah. And I'm not getting good reviews on the circuit attorney from, I like to talk to Kim Gardner, but she's getting a lot of bad reviews from lawyers. So we'll see. But I think he'll get impeached just because he has no friends in Jeff City.
Yeah.
And
friends in general.
yeah. Well, do you guys know any of his friends? People grew up with him?
No. I knew his.
We knew
younger
people
brother.
who knew him well.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had teachers who knew him well. But
Do you ever see him?
These are personality traits that have been in his history. Like he's long been this kind of arrogant, entitled, kind of blowhard.
But you never saw him at, like, weddings or something like that?
No.
or-
No, I think his brother was a year younger than us.
Yeah,
He
we
was-
don't. We don't have any direct.
What's his brother doing? I never hear anything from him.
I don't know.
Little
He was big
Greitens.
into drama.
No
at the
idea.
time. And then I know that Eric Greitens dated one of our good friends' older sisters.
Yeah, we don't want
They
to
were
get
high
too
school
personal.
sweethearts.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only personal info I've been able to get on Eric Greitens is I do know one childhood friend of his who you know, but I'm not going to say her. Even though I don't like her, I think she's a piece of shit. But I'm not going to say her name on the air just because I don't want to get all into that. But she's a childhood friend of his and was a Democrat that supported him, and
Yikes.
another person who you know as well. Told me that her friend gave Eric a hand job in high school. So other than that,
Now we're going to say
Is there a photo?
but I don't think she was blindfolded or anything
Yeah.
like that. So nothing going on.
Man.
Going with that.
Yeah, I would like that to be over with. He's done no.
We scandalized Mark, but
Yeah.
6 inches of Navy Steel.
But it's interesting. It's sad. Missouri used to be. It was a purple state, like you said. Like we never had to be too embarrassed about it.
Right.
And but the age of like even the blue dog Democrats outstate, they're gone. They're long gone.
but like once you get to Jeffco, basically,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a whole different thing.
Right.
It's like the Confederacy. It's like the South. You know what I'm trying to say? And like I don't see how you could feel comfortable that unless you grew up there and you have some progressive leanings. I can understand that. But I'm saying I don't see how the Vines brothers could go to Jefferson County and just feel comfortable.
No,
Just
it's super weird.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, and you guys probably too, but I feel like since the Obama presidency, that people have gotten much more vicious. And then when Trump was elected, they now have a megaphone, and it's like validation for them. So they've got this this platform to speak out and be complete assholes and racists and anti-Semites and whatever else, homophobes.
It's awesome.
The filter's off.
Left more fervently vocal as well, and
Right. Yeah, the pendulum kind of swings.
What's the deal with the map with all the pins on it?
that was our U.S. map. We had that hanging up in the front of our shop for the first 7 years.
Okay.
And
our shop.
we collected so many international. There were so many people from out of the country.
They're pins for where people visited from.
Right. Oh yeah.
So
that's where people are from. So we replaced it in January with a world map.
Okay.
And now that is completely full.
Do you
Okay.
have any
But-
pins from West County? 'Cause
There's probably
Yeah,
quite a few.
We were the first
And-
two.
Yeah.
And the photo, is that all local models?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
Mallory on the first
Yeah,
one?
that's Mallory.
Yeah.
That was an old one. That's a
St. Louis
long time.
Improv Anywhere. That
Yeah.
was the old crew. That's probably at least 6 years.
Is that
old.
Jarrett or Jared in the middle or something like that?
No, that's
That's Emmanuel in the middle, the
but
bottom.
You know Jared too. He moved
Yeah,
to Chicago.
there's
right?
there's a lot of cool photos. Some of those that we don't even know. We're not sure who they are. Just a couple of them, but they were cool. They were like a improv troupe around.
Yeah.
St. Louis.
I think Mallory's company just got a contract to design
Yes.
Shoto or something
Shoto
like that.
Greenway,
She's
yeah.
like at Harvard or something, right?
Did she go to Boston
Yeah, I
now?
think
She's
she
in
is.
Boston.
yeah, she was in D.C. now Boston, but
She's so cool.
we got to get her on the podcast.
Yeah, you
She's
do.
great.
She's
I think
so
her
cool.
heart is here in St. Louis. So.
Yeah.
And,
All right, well, it's been good talking to the brothers.
You too.
You guys.
And follow. Can I say one last thing?
Huh? Talk about Cherokee. Oh, okay.
Cherokee.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Cherokee.
So, Cherokee Street. We're on lovely Cherokee Street at the corner of Cherokee and Compton. We've did some street interviews and talked to people. What they feel about Cherokee Street, what they, how they see the future going, how they see the present, the past, etc. You guys feel good about Cherokee Street right now? I mean, I'm here, guys like big. You got the Cinco de Mayo shirt on or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Lacaille, Cherokee.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love Cherokee Street, and it continues to be a source of inspiration and motivation for us. And it's a diverse urban neighborhood, so there should be diverse opinions about where it's going, where it's headed, and how. And that's okay. I think this is a place that fosters that kind of dialogue. And if there's not friction, then it's a boring place to be. And yeah, Cherokee, we love Cherokee Street. We're sad that Ann McCullough, who's kind of the Cherokee liaison, who's helped connect so many different people and places on the street, she's going to be leaving St. Louis at the end of June.
Where's she going?
She's going to Oregon,
Oregon, somewhere
part
west
of Oregon, to just kind of get away from city stuff, I guess, and sow her oats, which is awesome. She deserves it. She's done such a great job, and but big shoes to fill. So whoever takes on that role has a pretty high bar to meet.
Do you think that this street, which is kind of iconic in St. Louis, for its mix? Well, when I think of Cherokee Street, I'm going back in history, the hard hats and the kind of Southside Hoosiers, and then it being the hub for prostitution, who've been ran off to Broadway.
They're still around.
And South Grand. Yeah, but they're more on South Grand and on Broadway and Bates and that area. Polar Pops, you'll see the Polar Pop cups. It's not the glamorous stuff you see on HBO. It's more of a dollar store variety. We're a blue collar city, and I would say proportionally, St. Louis is not a good looking city. I'm traveling around the country, so I mean, you have
not the worst either.
You have beautiful people here, no doubt about it. But proportionally, St. Louis, we're largely an unattractive, shabby lot. I can say that as an old St. Louis guy.
Yeah, I guess it depends what you're looking for.
Depends what you're looking for.
Some
people are like in the old buildings and stuff like that, like Michael Allen, taking pictures of the Spivey building and stuff like that. So, some people are like the Taj Mahal, some are like the Spivey building in its current state. But my point, my point is today we see this mix of being known as like hipster and Mexican, two big defining, and of course Antique Row further east, and the large African American population in the surrounding blocks. Do you think these three groups, or four, right, including the antiques, can coexist?
I think they have been, and I think that mix is actually increasing and growing, and I think it's probably more of a diverse mix than it has been. And it's not just anecdotal either. I think I can count, several of the new businesses, maybe a majority, seem to be either immigrant and or minority owned. That have opened in the last several years. I think of Teatopia, Brandon Vaughn, his boutique over there. There are several new Mexican places, the Hop Shop, and a number up and down. I think that there would be more concern if there's a sudden, increase in new businesses that were all seem to be owned and patronized by the same demographic groups, but that is definitely not the case. Although, of course, you will hear people say those things, but I think it's unfounded from my vantage point.
I know that there's a Latina woman that I want to interview at some point, but I think she's gone right now from St. Louis, that has a differing opinion. So there is the perception out there, whether it's the reality or not, I'm not the right person to determine that there is a diminishing role for Mexican Americans in the Cherokee Street area.
And if that is the case, and we're probably not the best barometers of that either, but that needs to be addressed and certainly needs to be looked at. But there are so many businesses that have opened recently that are Hispanic owned. It seems like more than are closing seem to be. But whatever, I mean, that's a very valid possibility.
Ask a question.
But that's happening. Yeah.
I just want to ask a question. One of the things we got into on Facebook, which again I may seem vicious online, but I'm a butterfly in real life, is the idea of the north-south distributor. And I just wanted to ask, north-south distributor,
Metrolink.
north-south, yeah, Metrolink. I just wanted to ask you why you think that would be so vital for the city, personally, as a business owner in South City.
Sure. Well, I think St. Louis is historically a transit city, built on streetcar lines. It was the lifeblood. It dictated the infrastructure and the patterns of development. And St. Louis has a very rich built environment that lends itself very well to transit friendliness and accessibility, and it's a compact urban, city. We have two lines headed east and west on Metrolink, and I think it's a great system. It could be better, but it's a great foundational system. The missing link, pun intended, is the north-south. And we talk about all these wonderful projects and visions and master plans that the city needs to do to revitalize. I don't think any would have as profound and far-reaching and lasting effects as a north-south Metrolink. Reason being, the immediate effects that puts a lot of people to work. It's a major infrastructure project. B, it breaks down geographic, psychological, historical, racial, and social barriers, and it gives people access to the city without having a car. So it really checks all the boxes. Then when people talk about wanting to live in a city, why do you do it? Yeah, sure, you like all the glitzy and the cool buzz and the action, but it's also a convenience thing. You like to be able to have many options available to you to get around. And that's one of the benefits of city living versus suburbs. And we just need to complete that framework.
I look at it, as Randy said, St. Louis really was built to be a transit-oriented city. I have a book here that I think in 1890, 90% or 94% of the city's population lived within 3 blocks of a streetcar line. So if you think about how dense and walkable and that was, and it's like putting transit back into the urban core is like pumping blood back through its veins.
How did we fuck up so much where at the turn of the 20th century, there were plans, you've seen this probably, Mark, where there were plans for a subway system, but similar to the one in New York City.
That's why.
Yeah, and then being the streetcar hub, right, to being just for as long as I can remember in my lifetime, public transit here just sucks. And the question is, it sucks. We all know that. It needs to improve. How to improve it? And do we have the density to really sustain it? That's the problem, like in Dallas-Fort Worth, these big populations in Houston, is because they're having the same discussions there. People want better transit, and they have a more extensive light rail than we do, but the metro area is so big, it's so sprawling. Like, how do you even go about it?
Well, I don't think you can look at it like, is this going to be financially, sustainable from that standpoint? I mean, most public transit agencies operate at a deficit, right? So if you're looking at it like, is this going to be a moneymaker? Not necessarily, but think about all the peripheral and intangible benefits that result from having a connected, rail transit city.
Well, that's the Joe Edwards argument.
Well,
it's not a moneymaker, but it's going to bring people
Well,
down
that has yet to be seen, but you know.
Yeah, we still don't know. We can't judge that.
So do you want a Cherokee Street trolley? Or
No, I mean it'd
No,
be neat. That'd be nice that like when they reimagine the metro, they're realigning the bus system here, and it looks like the last map I saw took the bus off at Cherokee, which I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
But I would love to see some kind of connector. There has to be some transit access here, but
It can't just be the service itself. It has to be, the whole approach, the marketing.
I would be
everything has
for-
to be different.
getting a loop trolley that started at the White Castle in Grand and Gravelwood,
There you
go down Cherokee, and end at the rallies on Jefferson.
that'd
I
be
could do
awesome.
You should buy a monthly
Well, what I
pass.
thought would have made sense is have a streetcar line from the Grand Avenue Water Tower on the north side all the way to Carondelet Park.
Yeah.
On the south, that seems like a really logical.
How do you square these rail line ideas with people like we just talked to Mitch the other day, who said, we need more bus frequency, not just for bus frequency in the city, but in the county where everybody lives.
Well,
A million people live, and in North County specifically, where North County and West County, you probably know, the closest bus station to me, I think, is up on Manchester Road and Wideman or something like that. And there's like bus routes every half mile, whereas in the city it's not. How do you square the needs of a north-south? And I assume when you say north-south, like you mean up to like say Baden down to like Limay, because that's how far you're going to have to go to make it legitimate for the county to chip in as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's politics involved too, because there's only so much that the county can do or whatever.
And federal money as well.
What I think is that it makes the most sense to me, and I'm no expert, but this is just how I perceive it, to serve the most densely populated part of our metro area first, where there are the highest concentration of transit users in the metro area. And if we can make the city of St. Louis, our urban core, one of the most accessible of its kind, of its pure set, then you have a really nice structure to build upon that you can always expand and fan out as the needs arise and more people want in on this. But it just makes sense to build in the city. People talk about, why don't you make a Metrolink line down Highway 40?
That was me.
I don't think that's really. I think that's you're serving. I think most people, if they have the choice or the luxury to drive a car, they're going to choose to drive a car. Just easier.
I'm just saying, as a West County person, I would prefer to take the Metrolink to the Cardinal game.
Yeah.
And what you're telling me is that this new line that you want me to pay taxes on will not help me get to the Cardinal game any faster. I'm just
Right.
I'm
Well,
not
the
saying
reality.
I don't really think that. I'm
But
speaking as
But
an asshole.
there's another thing that we got to realize is that there is not going to be a West County line like that, and there's not going to be a South County line like that. If there is, it'll be limited in scope because
They built it in Clayton.
and there's a lot of buyer's remorse in the county on that, and people in St. Louis Metro, West County, South County, St. Charles County, they see that as giving black people easier access to those areas. That's the reality. That's not just a St. Louis thing. That's when they were building it out to Virginia and the D.C. area, et cetera. I just think South County will fight it tooth and nail.
And that's fine.
And West County.
Well, let me say one more thing. And I don't mean to get in the podcast. I know I wasn't really supposed to talk on the podcast, but I have a girlish voice. The idea that I hear in the county, in Zero County, unfortunately, and I hate living there, is that because the city is shrinking, and at each census we predict it will continue to shrink, are we, by building a north-south Metrolink line specifically in the city, are we putting too much hope in a revitalization turnaround? Because that's what we did with Mill Creek Valley, that's what we did with Pruitt-Igoe. Are we expecting too much from something when the population continues to move westward?
Well, I think
that's not my opinion. That's just what I hear.
I don't think so. I mean, I think for anyone, I think it gives someone who's on the fence maybe a reason not to move west if they can be carless, or move out of town altogether.
But
right?
are you? But when you say that, are you thinking about families with children who want to send their kids to school, or are you thinking about single people who are going to move to the county when they want to send their kids to school?
I'm not thinking about any one group in particular. I'm just thinking about. As a city, I mean, it's like we don't have a shot if we don't have a functional and expansive transit system. And there has to be a realization that, thinking regionally means agreeing that the urban core is the center of our region, and that not every far-flung, suburb west of here is of equal value in the scheme of our metro area. So it's like, if we can all acknowledge that the urban core is the center, then the way that our government is set up now, if the county doesn't want it, the city should build it alone, and we'll see who comes out on top because of that. I really think that would be.
We got to wrap.
amazing.
We got to wrap this
Go
up.
ahead, sorry.
But I was just saying in closing that city's important. North County also has huge transit needs, and with that, good talking to the Vines brothers.
Yeah,
Absolutely, we agree with North County
thank you.
too. I'd like to see that happen too, for sure.
Yeah, North County does have a MetroLink line.
Pants.
Fancy pants.
Oh, fancy pants.
Fancy pants. Fancy pants. Fancy pants. Fancy pants. Fancy pants.
Gotta put on your fancy pants tonight. Going down to the city where the lights are bright with my disco balls and my LED light. Gotta put on my fancy pants tonight. Let's hear that bass now.